And this is another example of different behavior. I use the same model because there is no point in making another one. So this is the this will be only one component, the flexible one. And if we examine the flexible component, it is as before, so it is constrained, so the screw can rotate and the nut is traveling along the screw. So basically it is the nut traveling along the screw, or whatever, the screw traveling through the nut, depending on how you see it. If you see it from the perspective of the nut, it is the you know how it works. So basically this is relative movement between the nut and the bolt. So either the bolt travels through the nut, or the nut travels along the bolt. So this is basically two ways you can see that. So in any case, nut travels along the screw, or screw travels through the nut. Both ways are okay, and of course the rotation of the screw against the nut is required to achieve that. So having that in mind, we can proceed to presenting what is happening. So as we have explained, it is either nut traveling along the bolt, or the bolt traveling through the nut. Currently there are no constraints in this assembly, and now what I will try to do is I will try to fix the nut in context of the top level assembly, and to make the bolt to travel through the nut, rotating in the same time. So I will find the nut, this is that component, and I will just constrain this component here to the top level assembly with nothing special. Just I will use origin planes. So far so good. So we have a nut that is fixed in the relation to the top level assembly. It doesn't move in the top level. So now when I having this component as flexible, now when I try to push the bolt or rotate the bolt, it should travel the nut, or if I push it, it should rotate. But what happens is that I can freely push the bolt through the nut, and it doesn't rotate, as you can see. And I cannot rotate the bolt in relation to the nut. For some reason, I'm not sure why. So basically the problem is, although this assembly is flexible, although when opened all the relationships are okay, but once placed in the assembly and constrained in certain way, it stops being. So internal constraints, especially the rotation translation constraints, stops to be recognized. It is no longer recognized, it is no longer followed by the constraint solver. So this is really strange. We can try to do the test. Let's put it 100. And let's I cannot constrain the nut to the, although I should be able, I cannot constrain the nut to the, because I don't know why. So basically I can try to constrain it to the top level assembly. Let's see. Now it doesn't even constrain. Let's see if it drives. Drive. Once driven, it follows the internal constraint, but if just dragged, it obviously is not following. So there is a bug that basically makes it possible not to obey the internal constraints, especially this one of the flexible subassembly. So again, constraint solving in inventor brings us into the situation where constraints that are defined are not being followed. Clearly, this moment the rotation translation constraint is not being followed, although as I have presented just driving the mate constraint, it is recognized on the top level assembly. So why it is not being used, why it is not being followed once the assembly is being solved, this is hard to explain.